Afternoon session. I'm Mohammed Maliki from University of Oregon Information Services. I'm just here to introduce our speakers. They're going to talk about Oregon 22 events, the cybersecurity events. If any of you are not familiar, or I'm sure most of you have heard of it, this was the largest track and field event that happened in the US for the first time, and it happened to be in University of Oregon. There was a lot of challenges that we encountered, but at the end it was quite successful. And thanks to all the networking folks, security folks, that spent a lot of time to bring that to a success. And by that, I'm going to introduce two of our speakers. First is Duncan Roth, Duncan Barth, Director of the Information Security, and John Miyake, he's the Manager of Cybersecurity Operations Center. Dad, we welcome them, and go ahead, please.
So Mohammed did a great job introducing us. He killed two of our slides. So this is the cyber awareness, general cyber awareness track. We're going to present on Oregon 22. Cybersecurity is a team sport. And we just had our intros from Mohammed. This is Duncan. I'm John Miyake. The Information Security Office here at the University of Oregon has a staff of 10 people full-time, and we have 9 student staff who are student security analysts.
So up here is just some facts that we've got about the World Athletics Championships. In case you didn't know, athletics is what the rest of the world calls track and field. As Mohammed said, it's the first time this has happened in the US. And in the US, most of us honestly don't really pay attention to track unless the Olympics are going on or you happen to live in Eugene. So, but it's really, really huge in the rest of the world. There's like a massive TV audience, especially. So during the championships and in the months of preparation, this was our highest priority.
So this is a view of the Hayward Field mid-event. Multiple athletic events are occurring on the field simultaneously. Attendance was great, looked good on TV, reflected well for the state of and the University of Oregon. Quite a few things are happening just in the photo alone, but much more below the surface to support the event.
So when we were asked to give a presentation at this conference about the work that we did with the World Athletics Championship and our CSOC, John and I were discussing, and we were sort of lamenting that there wasn't like some giant security incident that we had to deal with. And we're also like, oh my God, thank God there wasn't this giant security incident we had to deal with. So it's just that, you know, if you're gonna give a talk like this, you really want stories filled with like challenges and adversity and yeah, we figured this stuff out. But yeah, we don't have any of that to report. So what we are gonna talk about are the challenges, strategies, and sort of preparation that we did going into this, and what it taught us, and maybe what other people can learn from our experiences. So as the two quotes we've got up there try to point out, really it's collaboration and mentorship that really underpinned a lot of the preparation.
So many areas of concerns were things that we worry about on a day-to-day basis anyways. Phishing, ransomware, DDoS, interruption to university business. But this event clearly increased the stakes. Some service, interruptions on a day-to-day operationally can be manageable. However, the live broadcast out to the world was unacceptable. The high profile of this event also made us worry that we had a target pain in our backs, as hacktivists may want to use the event to make a statement. The high profile also meant the reputational risk of a DDoS or defacement is amplified. Unlike past World Athletic Championships, where they just stood up a network and tore it down right away, the university already had an established presence, which made it effectively a sitting target in comparison.
Especially since after the athletic championships are over, we still have a network that we would like to keep, secured. So one tricky part of securing this event were some of the restrictions that were placed upon us by the event organizers. Understandably, their concern was this is live TV, this is a live event, the show must always go on. And that meant we couldn't use a lot of our mitigation playbooks we had. They were concerned that if we're doing some active vulnerability scanning or active intrusion protection systems, that could negatively impact some of their workflows and things that are going on. straight just disabling the network jacks of critical systems, even if we detected some sort of like infection, that was a big no-no. So an example of this sort of like criticality is a story we have with some of the media that was covering the event. They are tasked with getting their media products to market as quickly as possible. There's just zero tolerance for any interruption, especially one that was because of some sort of like false positive in security automation. So like in one case, a media partner, they were taking photos of the men's 100-meter sprint finals. They got it from the camera onto their website, available to purchase from their customers in 24 seconds. So this is the timeline that these folks are working with. And you know, seconds matter just not on the field, but in all the things surrounding the operations of the event. So we couldn't be a roadblock in any of this. So given these constraints, we just had to have really, really good understanding of the expectations and effective ongoing communication with the event organizers and partners before and during the games. We needed to be able to rapidly communicate the scope and nature of anything we detected so that we could quickly collaborate on a non-disruptive response.
Beyond the line of communication with the organizers, we found real value working with our partners. With such a large event, nobody had all the information. And without close collaboration with a large number of those groups, we wouldn't even know what assets we're trying to protect, or much less what the risk we're trying to protect them, trying to mitigate were coming from. There are stakeholders at several government levels, along with event organizers themselves. We need to understand what each role the groups played and what capabilities they brought to the table. With organizers, it was important to understand their priorities, their concerns, and what happened before. One difficulty here is that due to turnover, some of the institutional knowledge about specific setup and pain points was lost to the organizers. Two specific examples of these collaborations were the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency's CISA tabletop exercise we went through with several partners, and the asset inventory we did with the University of Oregon and the organizer.
So in the run-up to the championships, CISA ran a security tabletop exercise that brought us together with a range of government partners, and they had some incident scenarios for us to go through. This tabletop wasn't technical. It wasn't designed to test our technical ability to respond to their scenarios, but it was really to make sure we had the processes in place to deal with them. This was honestly an excellent activity. It gave us a chance to work together with everyone ahead of the championships. And one of the findings was, although we had the capabilities to address their security scenarios, what was lacking were sort of lines of communication and decision authority among all the different groups that were working together. So an outcome was an effort to address this, where we specifically needed to define the communication paths between the various groups working on the games and solidifying the incident management process. Another activity we performed in the run-up was an IT asset inventory. So the University of Oregon has a very distributed set of IT organizations, where we've got different groups sort of running their own IT services. So our goal was to cast a wide net and inventory all the IT assets that would directly support the event, from obvious things, such as the computer system that controls the scoreboard, to less obvious stuff, like the catering management system that is used to plan meals and order food, which is important for the athletes that are living on site. So this process involved a lot of meetings with each group where they would identify their systems, provide some technical information about them, which then led into conversations about what they thought the risks to their systems were, what mitigations they had in place, and what they could put into place. This was a productive activity because a lot of the service owners had a really, really deep understanding about their systems and their constraints and the impacts, but they oftentimes hadn't had a chance to just sit down and look through their risks from a purely cybersecurity lens. We frequently discovered sort of hidden or shared dependencies that underpinned multiple systems. So for example, the service owner may have anticipated, like if the network goes down, my system's in bad shape. But one thing they may not have considered was that an externally provided authentication system goes down that they relied on. You know, they're also dead in the water. So it was a really good process. We shared this activity with the World Athletics folks, and they ran through a similar exercise with some of their major IT partners. An example there being the vendor that provided for the timing and scoring for the event. So, I mean, like I said, overall, this exercise really benefited everyone. The service owners were able to refine their risk management, and we were able to really help prioritize our efforts in terms of monitoring and vulnerability assessment for campus systems. We also just honestly got a much better understanding of what the key resources and interconnections were on campus ahead of the event. This is useful just because we didn't want to be, during the championships, having to deal with an incident at that point trying to figure out, well, wait, what is this system and why is it important and what's going on? So we were able to sort of front load some of that. So that was really useful. And as a side note, you know, we didn't have some fancy asset management system to deal with this. I mean, this was literally, we had some Excel spreadsheet with like a few dozen columns. It was low tech, but everyone knows how to use Excel. So we were able to sort of share it with the service owners, and they were like, oh, I just need to fill out a row that matches these columns. Cool, I could do that. So that actually worked out pretty well. So all these conversations sort of informed a layered set of defenses that we set up for this. Some were the purely technical things that you think of when you think of cybersecurity. We had two different types of DDoS mitigation platforms covering volumetric and non-volumetric attacks. We acquired a digital risk protection service that provided us with threat intelligence and takedown services, and we contracted a third-party pen test of our systems. Other mitigations revolved around communications. A really simple one, but I think helped, was that we provided a set of security tips that went into the information sheet that went out to volunteers and staffers. And then looping back to what I talked about before with the CISA tabletop, the O really worked together to put together these communication channels for the event. And our group made heavy use of these channels, collaborating at all levels, from the networking folks, the people, you know, doing front-end IT support on the ground, to providing cybersecurity status updates to our leadership and other stakeholders.
So the World Athletics CSOC was our central engine for operation, for detecting, investigating, coordinating, and mitigating cybersecurity events during the championships. It leveraged It leveraged the existing CSOC for the university with supplemental staff hired several months ahead of the event. To give you some background, the CSOC is composed of college students supported by full-time staff. The pool of student staff are varied and come from both Lane Community College and University of Oregon, with a number of disciplines or majors: computer information science, political science, psychology, and others. The training involves playbooks that cover such topics as ransomware, phishing, DDoS, etc., as well as covering tools that we have deployed: email protection, intrusion detection, denial of service, mitigation, digital risk protection, threat intelligence, and vulnerability assessment. It's a continual learning process, with last-minute tools being added and playbooks and processes modified as we go through the event to address changes and needs. Mentoring is part of the training, and that occurs with one-on-one with full-time staff and peer mentoring with existing CSOC senior student staff. Oops, that's me as well. Pictured is a view of the student security analysts in the CSOC working space during the event. The space is shared with the UO's Physical Security Operations Center, which operates under Safety and Risk Services. Over the next few slides, we'll briefly go over some of what was seen during the event. As mentioned during the beginning, nothing of major was detected. So we saw about 250 terabytes of data transferred from the subnets assigned for the World Athletic Championships. This was not only the only network or means that data was being transferred, but this was the primary networks that were deployed. Traffic was varied and was global in scope. The amount of traffic greatly differed between zones or segments, with folks like the rights broadcast and media having the most. And those are the folks on the far left of that graph. Network traffic was segmented based on use case into separate zones: host broadcast, right broadcast, photographers, event management, athletes, media, and others. The type of traffic seen from these zones varied, and criticality to the execution of the event did as well. Examples of high versus low priority networks: the event management segment was used for timing and scoring, so very critical to the event. Athletes, while it sounds critical, is really for their personal devices, so overall less critical to the production side from a technical perspective. Throughout the 12 days, we'll talk about the threat detections here, we saw detections from the World Athletic Champions subnets, which required continual investigation by the CSOC staff, determine potential impact, and document detections in affected systems. Predominantly, detections we saw were adware and similar, very low level, not likely to impact the criticality of the event. The large green spike you see in the screen was an initial point of concern based on the number of systems detected. However, pursuant to investigation by the CSOC staff, it was determined to be false positive. We raised it as a concern with our vendor, and they removed that detection soon after. Outside the event network, we also several detections that were concerning as well. Actually, on the event network as well. The first one we thought was a botnet. It really wasn't a botnet, but it was on a critical segment. We looked into it and determined that it was a false positive, and just detections are triggering off normal communications within the subnets. The other thing we saw as well was a contractor, a third-party contractor on the University of Oregon side that was in a critical area of the network, and they were doing some scanning, looking for some of the services, the hosts that they're supposed to be working on. So not good practice for a vendor. We did follow up with that, but was not a critical issue at the time. And so we saw about 5,000 unique MAC addresses per day on the events networks. So quite a few hosts that came onto the network that we didn't normally have there.
All right, so the lessons learned, this isn't some grand revelation, but it's always good to just reflect and reaffirm some of your core principles and activities. You got to make sure that your communication is in good shape and that who's responsible for what. The CISA tabletop exercise really helped drive home that first point, which is so many stakeholders who all had different areas of responsibility, who may not have worked together before, and all had their own internal communication methods that were, well-tuned and set up for them. There needed to be a way for all of those to effectively mesh. So this exercise really helped identify those gaps. A core rule that is often said during these events is speak up. If you see something, say something. You can't just assume that something odd is just being taken care of by someone else. There's so many moving parts and so much complexity. It could well be that was dropped, and you noticing it can help it get resolved and not turn into a larger incident. But speak up only works if you know who to speak up to. Otherwise, you're really just shouting into the void. So getting those communication paths is just so critical. Our second lesson up there should be pretty obvious. Can't defend unless you know what you're defending. But again, in a complex environment, there's not a single person that's going to know all the details. In our asset inventory, we got real value out of determining some of these hidden shared dependencies in our services, and that really helped us target our limited resources. And then our final lesson up there really boils down to no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Prior to the event, we didn't have good empirical data on the types of threats we would face. I mean, we had a lot of speculation, but to some degree, we prepared as best we could. We went in, and then we figured we'd deal with what comes up based on the best of our preparation. It ended up working out well in the end. I think our preparation certainly helped, but it doesn't mean that we weren't adapting our CSOC processes continuously as we went along. We were modifying our playbooks throughout the event, up through the last day and into the teardown process when the event was officially over. Adaptivity is just so critical to cybersecurity. I think it's really neat that the students working in the CSOC really got to experience this event because they sort of saw this need for learning and adapting really firsthand. And it was really inspiring working with them and watching them develop their skills, learning from not just us, but also each other.
So some of the other takeaways that came from the event is desire versus capability mismatch. So what we want to do is not always what we could do within the confines of time, effort, and resources. You have to continue to evaluate your needs as within your resource constraints, and you need to also choose your battles. When possible, leverage those opportunities that were gained. So we did a lot of effort building up to this event and did development during the event that we want to continue to use and move forward. So our playbooks and our processes all improved. We're continuing to grow on those as we work with the CSOC. And looking to the future, continuing with partnerships we started. So there's a lot of folks that we worked with that we want to continue to grow and extend those partnerships.
Which then brings into, what can we do going forward and what can you do? And what we learned is you really need to just be working with your community. Whether you're going to be running cybersecurity for a World Athletics Championship or you've just got a new project coming up or you just want to refine your existing processes. Reach out to the other cybersecurity practitioners, make connections and learn from each other. You're at this conference. This is the perfect opportunity. Make use of the hallway track, sort of the time between sessions to just strike up conversations with the people around you and find out, what are their pain points? What are they dealing with? What are you dealing with? See what those connections are. You may run into just some random thing where a random conversation can strike a real solution to a tangible problem that you're having. Talk to the folks running the services you're tasked with securing, and make sure you really understand their perspectives, needs, and constraints. As we said, cybersecurity is a team sport. Help them view their systems through the cybersecurity lens, and at the same time, let them help you really understand what their operational needs and concerns are. If your sector has an ISAC, make sure you've joined. They're a valuable source of information and threat intelligence. And again, if you've got relevant communities of practice, contribute to them, participate. Again, an additional source of awareness, but also as a way to contribute back to the overall good. And you may get a chance to mentor others and the next generation of cybersecurity folks who we truly need.
So we'd like to thank you for the folks that helped us support the event, federal, state, and local partners such as CISA, FBI, Oregon Fusion Center, Link Oregon, University of Oregon partners, and the cast and many others. This is your opportunity for questions if you have any. Does anyone have questions? Yes, sir. You, sir.
So, hindsight, if obviously your answer can't be more people or more time, but if you magically went back and were to do it all again, what would you do different? What'd you learn that you're like, start all over, this is what we do next time?
I think we had great partnership, but you can always develop that ahead of time, right? Start that now. It's like the statement about the tree. When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago, the other best time is now. So obviously we had a chance, build partnerships ahead of time. Also, we did a lot of focus improvement in our processes and our tooling. We need to do that continuously, perhaps more often, not just for the events that come up.
Yeah, and you took exactly what I was going to say with the partnerships and just building those partnerships early, I think would have, it could have helped even more.
Patrick, and then
Yeah, this was a great overview of what we all did for Oregon 22. I know this event is held every 4 years as for because of COVID. Can you talk a little bit about what World Athletics had done for previous track and field events?
So that's actually interesting because the World Athletics staff had gone through some personnel turnover. So we weren't actually able to get very specific cybersecurity data of what happened in previous events.
And so at one time in the past, I did have a security operations center, professional one that was hired for the event. And we were excited. We were going to say, hey, we're going to get some knowledge from this. We're going to see what their concerns, what they saw, so we could prepare. And that's where the knowledge was lost. So they knew that it occurred, they didn't have that information moving forward. Sir?
This was a pretty big event with a lot of moving parts, and it sounds like a lot of vendors. Do you know if there was any sort of vetting or anything around that needed to be done around those vendors? Because a vendor, on a secure part of the network, or a compromised vendor has taken places down multiple times. So I'm just curious what you did for vendors in specific.
So if the in-house networking was all done in-house. So our folks are very good at what they do, and they're very protective of what they do. And so they did the best they can, having redundancies and having folks available and staff to look out for those issues. As to vetting, I don't know in that respect.
Yeah, from the,
Does Patrick have an answer to that?
Yeah, I worked on the support side of the event, so I did work with some of the vendors. And the vendors, for the most part, for World Athletics are a known quantity. They're companies that they've worked with at other events. And so in a lot of cases, we did this event in Qatar 5 years ago, and it's, in a lot of cases, a lot of the same vendors. It's just a different location, different layout, different network. And then, of course, the advancements in technology. So I think that World Athletics already had pre-existing working relationships with all of the vendors.
And maybe to clarify, my question wasn't about World Athletics vendors. The question was, the UFO and the vendors that supplied the tools and the resources that you use. Did you have to do
So a lot of that was pre-existing stuff we already had present. We just made sure that we focused on and incorporated for those networks that are out there. We did stand up some new vendors, but they were basically vendors that we knew that were out there as either best of breed or well-known in that sector, and we use those resources. Perhaps not answering your full question, we can talk about more
Let me
afterwards.
say, add on something to this, if I understand this question correctly. I work with the networking team, and we build the infrastructure, the switches, router, wireless, and all that. Unfortunately, there was some disorganization going on from the people, the folks, or other groups that were involved with the World Athletics. So it was not timely. Timely was not organized. We had to order a lot of equipment just in case request comes up. I'll give you an example. The day before the event, a group of photographers came in. There was like 20 of them from all over the world, and we had provided wireless for them. They said, "Oh, we don't want wireless. We want wire connection." And then my boss was there, and I was there. They said, "What are we going to do?" He says, "Nothing. Just go back and configure a few switches, bring a couple of students with tags, we build it up." In a matter of 3 or 4 hours, we built it up for them. We gave them the wire, and they were really surprised. Oh my gosh, what a service. So things, if that answers your question, things like that were coming up. But we were ready. We had enough equipment, backup, the staff. People worked, believe it or not, 17 hours, 18 hours a day, coming at 5 a.m., working till 7, 8 p.m. So that was not unusual. And at least a year or year and a half preparation were into this. We were expecting these kind of things because people are not organized, so distributed, COVID and other things. So luckily, we had enough equipment to cover at least the infrastructure part of it. And that's why it was such a huge success. We got a lot of feedback from the other vendors, people that were involved in this kind of large activities, and it was wonderful. So, okay.
On the infrastructure side, this is obviously a massive event that's probably scaled much larger than your actual typical need. How much of this infrastructure did you have to put in place that didn't exist before, and did you take any of it down after the event?
Yeah, so I would say huge percentage of it, particularly building up the wireless. We had tents, we had to give them connectivity. And after the event, we took all those things we put in, we brought it back. But for the next event, we are ready. We have the blueprints. We know what to do and how to set up these things. Answering your question, I say I really can't give you the percentage, but I would say 50, 60% around Hayward Field was all new equipment and new setup, from fiber optic wiring, cabling, access points.
And some of that was temporary.
A lot of it was temporary. A lot of it, especially wherever you saw tents, they were all temporary. And even in the field, we had temporary. So here, I'll give you an example, talking about temporary. We had switches underground, near the jumping area, avalanche and all that. And then the sprinkler comes out in the evening. So those switches are going to get wet. They were underground. So every day we had to remove those switches, there were like dozen of them, and then in the morning we have to go put it back so they don't get wet. That gives you some ideas how temporary this stuff was.
The reason I asked that question is there was a fantastic podcast about people who come in with these massive trucks and set these huge
Yeah.
temporary networks
Yeah.
for these kinds of events, and it turns out that it's a lot more complicated and a lot more difficult than people realize.
It is, believe it or not, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the network folks put in a huge effort, and I think, yeah, the network support folks did an incredible job, and I think it's a testament, the event successful is a testament to their work, but also to their day-to-day work, because again, they had a robust, solid campus network that we were scaling from, right? So unlike a lot of things, we weren't building this from scratch. We had,
And you weren't building it on crumbling infrastructure. Yeah.
Gabe?
Gabe?
I'll sideline myself.
Okay. Anyone else have?
No, you're gonna ask the question. What do you mean leave it there?
Oh, don't do this. This is Gabe. You don't ask Gabe questions.
Sorry ahead of time. So the sources of data that you, the U of O security team, and your CSOC team were using as, I would assume, what you guys were trying to detect for threat detection. You mentioned all these other agencies. Did they have visibility into the same traffic?
They did-
Was there any coordinating off of that
They did
data?
not have visibility in the traffic, but just the University of Oregon staff who saw that. We did have representatives from the FBI and other resources available to us. We saw something, or if they heard something that they need to keep us informed on. So they were present and available on site to us.
Yeah, so they weren't actually accessing that data?
No, they
No.
were not. More questions? Because I think we are at time.
If I may, I appreciate it if when you go back, fill out the evaluation and make your comment. That would be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. So